Vincent, be happy.
Never happy.
Hey guys, I'm Nath Martyn, the Whisky Scribe. I'm a whiskey enthusiast and I love all things whiskey. But taste is subjective. There's a lot of whiskies out there and a lot of different ways to get them. So whether you're a whiskey connoisseur or you're just looking to understand more about whiskey, let's explore it together. Now, if you want to see more from me, please consider subscribing. I put up new videos every week. You can also follow me over on Instagram. Now, a couple of months ago, I did a video on the different types of whiskey clubs that you can join, from in-person tastings to bottle subscription services. Now, you can watch that video here, but there was a type of whiskey club that I forgot to mention, that of the whiskey sample bottle subscription service. So today, I have one of the whiskey sample boxes from Liquor Loot, and full disclaimer, they did send me this in order to try it. But this isn't a paid endorsement, so I'm gonna do my best to be as impartial as possible. I'm gonna judge the whiskey on its merits rather than the fact that I got it for free. So Liquor Loot started back in 2016 and they were originally called Whisky Loot because they just did whiskey subscriptions. They've since branched out into doing some gin subscription boxes as well, so that's why they've diversified their name a little bit. But whiskey is still a very big focus for them. So they provided a whiskey subscription service that was very curated. It was designed for beginners who are exploring whiskey, so you would start out with some of the really basic, the core flavor profiles, and each month you would get introduced to a few new distilleries, a few new different styles of whiskey to help you expand your knowledge. And the general idea was that it was cheaper than going and buying a new bottle each month, and even cheaper than if you actually purchase those drams over the bar. Now, this is a great concept, especially if you're first starting out. So the only real reason I didn't subscribe to Liquor Loot back then was because I was already attending tastings regularly. So most of the early whiskies that were in those exploration packs were whiskies that I'd already tried. But now Liquor Loot has another subscription option, that of the Advanced Whiskey Pack. So the regular subscription is $64 a month, but the advanced whiskey subscription is $99. But what you're getting for that is more rare whiskeys, so higher age statements, cask strength options, independent bottlings, some of those rare and premium things that you're probably not likely to catch very often. And that's what I have here. So let's check it out. So this is a pretty nice box. And what we have here are 3 60ml samples, which I really quite like that idea because I find 30ml is a bit limiting when it comes to samples. So you can only taste it once, whereas with 60ml here, you can either come back and try it again or you can share it with another person. And the bottles do actually look pretty nice too. You've got the whiskey notes in here, which have a bit of information about the lineup, why it was put together that way, as well as your tasting notes for the whiskies. So a lot of these are the sorts of notes that I would look up about a whiskey before I actually try it. So having this already provided is really, really handy. And then you've also got this tasting notebook. And it includes a couple of pages at the start which cover how to generally go through a whiskey tasting. It includes a flavor glossary, the sort of terms people use when they're talking about whiskey flavors. And the thing that I really like is that you've actually got a color chart for the different shades of whiskey. So when people talk about how the whiskey looks, whether it looks like copper or straw or old oak, you've literally got a color reference here that you can hold the whiskey in front of. And then you've got plenty of pages to fill out. So with the tasting notebook, it's very guided. It's providing a lot of information for it to help you through it. So if you're a beginner, this is ideal. Whereas personally, as somebody who's tasted a lot of whiskey and taken a lot of notes, I also really like this because there's a lot of space for the notes. I've seen a few of these sorts of whiskey notebooks and there's not much space for that. This gives you room to write quite a bit. You don't have to fill it out, but if you want to write a lot of notes, you've got plenty of space. The other thing I quite like about these bottles is there's quite a bit of information on the bottle itself. So sometimes when you get sample bottles, it'll be the distillery name and just like 1 or 2 words about what the expression is. This, you've got the distillery name, you've got what it was aged in, the age statement, where it's from, ABV, the number of standard drinks in this bottle, and you've also got the logo from the distillery, which shows that they've actually got the rights to pre-package this themselves. It makes it look a little bit more legitimate. And if you were to pop this on the shelf and come back to it 6 months later, you would know exactly what's in here instead of trying to remember what exactly that one distillery name what that one whiskey expression was from that distillery you had. So like I said, usually when I do whiskey reviews, I do a little bit of research about the distillery, how the whiskey was made, and what sort of flavor profiles you're meant to get out of it. But Liquor Loot's actually provided all of that information this time, so I'm going to let them do the hard work and I'll just read off their notes. So this tasting is Old World versus New World. Welcome to the start of your new Whiskey Loot journey. In this box, we'll be exploring an under-the-radar cult malt from Scotland and pitting it against two New World superstars. We'll explore what makes Scottish single malt so unique and how so much innovation is happening here in Australia and around the whiskey world. So grab a glass and prepare yourself for the first advanced adventure. So the first one that we've got here is from Scotland, as they said, and it's the Aberlour Distillery 16-year-old double cask from Speyside. I've had quite a few whiskies from Aberlour. I quite love their Abunda series, but I have never had a 16-year-old. I've never had a 16-year-old from that distillery, so we're off to a good start. So the notes they've got here say, found in the heart of Speyside, the picturesque valley of Aberlour comes complete with its own waterfall. This dram shows off what the distillery is all about, with both spicy sherry butts and first fill bourbon cask used to produce a whiskey of superb balance and poise. At 16 years old, you can expect plenty of character from this one. So it's been aged in bourbon casks initially and then finished in sherry butts, which butts, fun fact, butts is a size when it comes to whiskey barrels or sherry barrels. So when people talk about a buttload of something, that is actually a unit of measure. I think it's about 500 litres. But we're here for the whiskey, not for a buttload of stuff. Before I look at the tasting notes, on the nose I am starting to get a little bit of that spice that they mentioned, and there's a very definite smell of raisins, which is really common when it comes to something aged in sherry casks. And there's real musty wood in the background. And then on the palate, that's quite nice. On the palate, I'm getting sort of like this candied wood almost. Like it's really pronounced in the oak, but this beautiful sweetness in there. And that's sort of lingering off a little bit as well. So it's taken a while for that, both the wood and the sweetness to dissipate, which for a 40% ABV whiskey is actually quite impressive for it to have that long of a tail. So according to their notes, this 16-year-old whiskey should get on the nose, raisins, sultanas, apricots, and dried cranberries, giving way to aromas of sweet oak, sandalwood, rich vanilla, honey, and roasted malt. In all fairness, I'd say most of those are in there. And then the taste, a medium body brings the same dried fruit from the nose, yep, accompanied by sweet toasted malt, ripe plums, I think that's probably that candied flavour, more apricots, flowers, and a darker oak. And then the finish is meant to last and last, yes. Serving up dry spice notes of cinnamon, black pepper, cloves, orange rind, nutty sherry, and toffee. I sometimes find tasting notes are sort of a bit obscure, like they'll be talking about getting marshmallows or the taste of some random thing you've never had before. These are all actually pretty spot on. I don't know if these are the notes that came directly from the distillery, if this is Liquor Loot's notes, but they haven't really said anything that I would disagree with in there. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm really biased for Aberlour. I love Aberlour as a distillery, which is why I'm so happy that I got to try the 16-year-old for the first time. They said that they were going to be pitching the Scottish single malts against other New World whiskies. What we've got next is Kavalan Distillery, which is actually based in Taiwan. So it's a cask strength 58.6% whiskey, matured in single port barrels, barrique, no age statement. But according to the notes about the distillery, Kavalan's Solist range is renowned for serving up some of the finest single barrel whiskey around. This bottling is no exception, a delightful port cask single malt from the Taiwanese distillery. Kavalan's warehouse experiences enormous fluctuations in temperature, reaching as high as 42 degrees Celsius, meaning the whiskey enjoys accelerated evaporation and maturation. So Taiwan, like Australia, can have those big temperature fluctuations, which tends to age the whiskey faster. And if you don't believe me, this is a non-age statement whiskey, so this probably is only around 2, 3, maybe 4 years old, but check out that color. Just a couple of years in a barrel to get that much color out of a port cask, that's amazing. Now, I have only recently tried Kavalan whiskey for the first time, and it didn't include this one. There was a port cask, I think it was a port cask finish, but it was watered down to about 40-something%. So trying this one at cask strength is something I'm actually excited for. So the first thing I'm noticing on the nose is if you had a Scottish whiskey that had been aged in port barrels, it would be you'd have that strong sweetness on the nose, but it'd be very soft. Whereas this is coming across quite a bit more sharp. So that aging process has happened quite a bit differently. It's almost got a little bit of a smell of almost agricole rum, so I'm guessing there's some sweetness in there. Okay, so on the palate, that's nowhere near as robust as I was expecting from a whiskey that's 58% ABV. I know in the past I've had a little bit of trouble assigning the ABVs to whiskies, but that is by no means as abrupt as you would expect a whiskey that high. And then the flavors, for that much color to come out of the port cask, there's not anywhere near as much sweetness as I thought there would be. I thought that the sweetness would almost be overpowering, but there's actually more of the wood notes in there. There's some light spices, but very much that oak, that really old oak is coming across. There's a little bit of sweetness in the back of the mouth, and there's actually quite a nice mouthfeel as well. That's really unexpected for what I thought I was going to get out of a whiskey that dark. In terms of the finish, it's a little bit astringent at the back of the palate. There's a bit of the bitterness that sort of hangs around, but it's not overpowering and it dissipates pretty quick. That's really, really different to what I was expecting. So the notes the Liquor Loot has provided say that on the nose, fragrant stewed plums and figs in syrup open this dram, soon joined by the earthy vanilla quality and notes of dark oak, cinnamon, raisins, and cacao nibs. The only thing in there that I didn't actually get was the vanilla. And then the taste, intense hot cinnamon lollies. Yeah, maybe. Followed by thick jammy strawberries, raspberries and cherries. Espresso, charred oak, and dark chocolate balance out the sweetness perfectly. That's interesting. I would say all of those sweeter characteristics that they say in the notes here, I found to be quite subtle. And I found that charred oak, the dark chocolate, that was more pronounced for me. But they're right, it does balance it out perfectly. This is extremely well balanced for a non-age statement whiskey from a country that has a very fast maturation period. And then it says that the finish is long. Yeah, I disagree with that. I'd say the finish is probably medium at best. So mouth-tingling flavors of black pepper, dessert wine, plums, red grapes, sweet licorice, cinnamon, and nutmeg. I didn't get licorice, thankfully, because I hate licorice. I wouldn't say it's quite sweet enough for me to say plums and dessert wine, but definitely the black pepper, and yeah, there is that mouth-tingling sensation on the finish. But all in all, really nice whiskey, and I'm glad I tried that. The last tasting I was at for Kavalan had 6 different whiskeys in the lineup, and from what I've heard of the distillery, they have a huge selection. They have a ridiculous amount of expressions, so it shouldn't be surprising that after trying 6 of their whiskeys that there was still more for me to try. But I'm glad I got to try that. So lastly, we've got an Australian whiskey, Corowa Distillery. So Corowa Distilling Co. matured in single Chardonnay cask from New South Wales, Australia, no age statement. It's called the Dreaded Drop Volume 1, 55% alcohol, so effectively cask strength, which means that this little 60ml bottle is 2.6 standard drinks. Now, I'm a very big advocate for Australian whiskey. I love Australian whiskey and I want to try as much of it as I can. So this has definitely been on my whiskey to-do list, but I haven't gotten to it yet. This is a distillery I have never touched because my whiskey to-do list is really, really long. So it's awesome that I'm actually getting to try this distillery that I've never even experienced before. So the notes they provided here about the distillery say, we've managed to get our hands on Corowa's most exciting single malt yet, the Dreaded Drop, which is a special release of the best single cask in the Corowa warehouse, selected by master distiller, I'm gonna say this wrong, Bo Shilg? Sorry, Bo. Volume 1 is a peated whiskey matured in a single Chardonnay cask, and without travelling to the distillery, the only place you can taste this dram is through Whisky Loot. That makes this all the more special. So if you look, you got a beautiful colour there. Oh wow. The nose on this is beautiful. There is a faint little bit of aniseed in the background, but I'm getting more charred oak. This faint sweetness, it's gonna sound romantic, but it actually smells a little bit like the Australian bush. Like just the right combination of wood and a little bit of organic matter, a little bit of vanilla in there. But that has a beautiful nose. I can't believe it's taken me this long to try something from this distillery. Honestly, I find some whiskies when I really enjoy the nose, I'm hesitant to even taste the whiskey because then you lose that sensation you get when you're smelling the whiskey and you haven't tried it yet. You don't get that same nose after you've tried the whiskey. So sometimes I'm not afraid to taste the whiskey. I just really enjoy the nose. Okay, I'm going in nonetheless. Wow, I haven't had a lot of peated Australian whiskey, but this is coming across sort of like it's like an equal combination of charred oak and ash. Like, you know, your typical Islay peat comes across in a very medicinal sort of fashion, but this is like a powdery ash. That probably sounds bad. I actually mean that in a good way, because it's really nicely balanced with the sweetness that's coming across from the Chardonnay casks. It's not super thick, but there's still that slightly buttery mouthfeel as well. It's really nicely balanced. That's sensational. I still can't get past the nose even after I've tasted it. But the finish, you got this thick warmth that's sitting at the back of the throat. Sort of burnt caramel sort of lingers around there as well. I could keep trying this forever. I'm gonna check out the notes though. So according to the notes that came with this, the nose opens up with a rush of beautiful spicy oak aromas, yes. Star aniseed, yes. Rich vanilla bean, yes. Slightly charred wood and buttered brioche toast. Haven't had much buttered brioche toast, but that's fair. The faint hint of barbecue charcoal. So that's that charred oak that I was talking about. And then on the taste, they say that the palate is thick and full-bodied, with a drying hickory flavor emerging first, followed by toasted marshmallow, burnt toffee, fragrant sandalwood, and a touch of elegant wood ash. I said ash. As far as tasting notes go, that's pretty accurate to what I just said, and I didn't read these first, I swear. And then the finish, they say it's long, turning peppery and spicy with lingering flavors of dark caramel, bittersweet dark chocolate, drying leather, buttery Chardonnay, and yeasty bread. I wouldn't disagree with anything there. I am really happy with that whiskey. So after all the years of hearing about Liquor Loot, that's my first actual exposure to trying it. I have to say I'm really impressed because, like I said, the reason why I didn't sign up initially was because most of those exploration whiskey packs were whiskeys that I'd already tried. I have never tried any of these whiskeys, and that even included a whiskey from a distillery I'd never touched before. And all of these were beautiful whiskeys that I would actually go out and buy. I would highly recommend these. So I'm really impressed with this, especially that Corowa. The sheer fact that the only way you can get that exact whiskey is to visit the distillery or sign up to Liquor Loot. But that is, as far as I'm concerned, that's a worthwhile whiskey subscription. It's even for somebody like me where it's May and I've already had about 100 different whiskeys this year. Just from all the whiskey tastings that I've been to and things like that. I have tasted about 100 different whiskeys throughout the last 5 months. So to still be able to give someone like me 3 whiskeys that I've never had before is actually, it's fair to call that whiskey tasting pack advanced. So talking of those subscriptions, Liquor Loot have 2 subscription models. They have the Exploration and the Advanced, and then they also have the Gin subscription. Now all of these subscriptions are actually available as gifts. So you can buy somebody a 3 or a 6 month subscription to any of those. And I have to say, as somebody who loves whiskey, if somebody gave me a 3 or a 6 month whiskey subscription, and it was like that, I would be pretty impressed. You can also purchase individual tasting boxes from the website without being a member. And they sell bottles as well. And if you're a member of Liquor Loot, you can get member pricing. They have Cape Byron Chardonnay cask available on their website. And the member pricing for this is $126. I paid $140 for this. I paid $140 at the distillery for this. So, I mean, that's a worthwhile perk right there, really. So if you are interested in checking out Liquor Loot, I'll put a link in the description below. They did give me this box, but I genuinely do actually recommend this as a way of exploring whiskey. I'm a big fan of meeting in person to do whiskey tastings, but not everybody wants that in-person aspect, and there's plenty of places where you don't have a local whiskey tasting club that you can attend. This is still a fantastic option, and it now covers both ends of the spectrum. Whether you're a beginner just starting out, or whether you're pretty experienced with whiskey, there's something that's going to satisfy you no matter what. But if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more from me, hit subscribe, and enjoy what's in your glass no matter where it comes from, and slange.